Good afternoon, good evening, as appropriate. Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Shaw. I am the project manager for the Vicksburg District. I'd like to welcome you to the virtual public meeting, which is an information-only meeting for the Pearl River Basin Flood Risk Management Project with respect to the draft environmental impact statement. With us today, we will have several speakers that will provide you some information that goes along with the environmental impact statement. We have with us a couple of folks on the screen, beginning with Robin Colosimo. Ms. Colosimo is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Army for Civil Works. It's project planning and policy review. We have Mr. Eric Bush, the Director of Planning and Policy at Headquarters USACE. Colonel Gibson, Jeremiah Gibson, is on the line, who is the Vicksburg District Commander. We have Keith Turner with the Rankin-Hines Pearl River Flood Control and Drainage District, who is the non-federal interest in this case. And then we have Jason Emery with the Regional Planning Environment Division South for USACE. And I would just like to make a couple of statements. We still have a few folks joining, and as we'll just continue on. And so the intent of this meeting today is to present some highlights from the products for the draft environmental impact statement. This statement went out for public comment on the 7th of June, and the 45-day review period was extended 15 days, which puts it to the 6th August of this year. The public meetings are held as part of the NEPA process. Important to understand that this particular session that we're having now is actually over and above what's required by NEPA. And the purpose is to kind of set the stage for the public meetings that are coming up on the 10th and 11th of July. And so we'll talk about those public meetings in just a minute. You can see there are several items on the agenda that we're going to cover. And so the very first thing I would like to do is go ahead and start with a message from Colonel Klein, who's the prior Vicksburg District Commander, and Colonel Gibson, our current commander. So bear with me a second as I swap screens here.
Hello, I'm Christopher Klein. On the 7th of June, 2024, the Vicksburg District published a draft environmental impact study, a pivotal step in our journey towards mitigating the flood risks plaguing the Pearl River Basin. Publishing the Pearl River Basin DEIS marks a significant milestone in our collaborative efforts with the community and local leaders to deliver a flood risk management strategy tailored to the unique needs of the city of Jackson and its surrounding areas. We're committed to providing a solution that manages flood risk and at the same time enables a wide range of additional benefits. It was an honor to lead the team through the publication of this important document. My time at the Vicksburg District, however, has come to an end, as the Army's transitioned me to another role in a district serving our warfighters, allies, and partners in the Middle East. The good news, though, is that the Army chose a very capable leader to continue the good work in the district. I'd like to introduce Colonel Jeremiah Gibson. Colonel Gibson most recently served as deputy at the Mississippi Valley Division in Vicksburg and has been following the development of this plan for months. Colonel Gibson, Jeremiah, welcome.
Thank you, Chris Klein, and for your dedication and leadership. To our partners, I assure you that the mission entrusted to us will continue with the same vigor and resolve. Together, we will navigate the complexities of the Pearl River Basin with diligence and foresight. For decades, flooding along the Pearl River has disrupted lives and livelihoods. Various proposals have been presented, yet none garnered definitive support. In July 2022, the Rankin-Hines Pearl River Flood and Drainage Control District presented a locally preferred plan to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, the Honorable Michael Connor. This set the stage for the Corps' involvement. Secretary Connor tasked us with bridging data gaps, identifying the National Economic Development Plan, and evaluating the merits of that plan. Through extensive public engagement, we've gained valuable insights ranging from the need for recreational areas, concerns about water quality, and existing concerns in the lower Pearl River. As we move forward, your engagement is critical. We invite you to attend our scheduled public meetings or submit your thoughts via email or mail. Your voices will shape the future of flood risk management in our region. In closing, I urge each of you to participate. Together, we can forge a resilient future for those who are affected by the Pearl River Basin and those who rely on its many benefits. Thank you.
All right, and I will get our presentation back up here. Okay. All right, and so that was the message from our previous commander and our current commander. And so I would now like to share, because this is a little bit of a different format, and it is all virtual, we've got some rules of engagement that we'd really like to share with you. So we would ask that you please be aware that the event video and the chat box are both being recorded. They will be made available to the public in the future for reference purposes. Please be aware that the phone numbers and email addresses that are entered into the chat would be available to the public. So if you don't want your information out there, I would proceed with caution. So we would ask that that you only put your questions in the comments in the chat box, please. This will help us to keep track of all the inquiries and ensure that everybody can participate in the informational meeting. I would also ask that you would please avoid from spamming, in other words, loading up the chat box with multiple messages that would, prevent other folks from maybe getting in there. The other thing is I would just ask if you're in through the WebEx, please keep your cameras off. Unfortunately, sometimes these meetings can be a little challenged from a bandwidth situation. So our speakers will have their cameras on. Would also ask that you please keep your microphones on mute if you're not speaking. And then the last thing I would ask is that please be respectful and courteous of others while we're in this meeting, and so that we would be able to proceed successfully and not have any major disruptions. So I would just say thank you for adhering to these rules, and we will get going, beginning with Robin Calcimo, speaking with respect to the meeting purpose. Ms. Calcimo?
Hi, I'm really thankful that I have the opportunity to talk with you all tonight and hear the public input. This is an important part of the process we're entering here. And that's what this meeting purpose is really about, the beginning of a discussion around what the draft EIS provides in terms of updates and information, and to receive your comments up through August 6th. From my view, and I'm here representing my boss, Mike Connor, the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, is overarchingly, this is a huge moment for Jackson, and it's a huge moment for this study. The work reflected in the draft environmental impact statement was guided by direction from my boss, provided a little over a year ago, that outlined what was required of the work to fill the information gaps that were previously referenced, build upon the work that was done before, and more importantly, seek to resolve decades of repetitive flooding in Jackson and within the Pearl River drainage. We know, you know more than us about the long-standing and repetitive flooding in the Pearl River drainage, most notably in 1979, 1983, 2020, and 2022. It's a long time for us to work together to figure out the solution that resolves a myriad of needs. In this regard, the draft EIS has been a collaborative effort. It's been responsive to prior public input, including listening sessions we held over a year ago, and peer reviews, prior peer reviews, that is. It encompasses updating modeling. It builds upon those prior studies by the Corps, Bank and Hines, and others. It outlines alternatives that can be implemented within current authority and can leverage the bipartisan infrastructure law monies set aside for both planning and construction of an alternative. We want you to also know that it's imperative any solution we implement, and by design we have considered this, that any flood risk management project must dovetail with the ongoing vital investments in Jackson water and sewer infrastructure, including those environmental infrastructure investments we've been able to make in the contributions to those assets. We know it's an important moment in time to make sure that Jackson begins to emerge from these repetitive damages and restore its community. Next slide, please. As we said, today's the first session. It's the first virtual session. We will be on the landscape for 4 more meetings on the 10th and 11th of June or July. The months are flying by the way. We're also taking public input via the website as outlined here. Much work has occurred over the last year, and we're all looking forward to garnering your input in the DEIS and look forward to finalizing the report and hopefully reaching a record decision with your good input. Thank you for the time today. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next on the agenda would be Mr. Eric Bush for the speaking on public review.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Bush, and I'm the Chief of Planning and Policy at Corps of Engineers headquarters in Washington, D.C. And I just want to start by saying, you know, the entire Corps of Engineers, Army Civil Works vertical team's participation in this public meeting tonight is indicative of how important this project is to Mr. Connor, Army Civil Works, and the Corps of Engineers, all the way up to the Chief of Engineers, General Scott Spellman. So let me just mention a couple of things here on this slide regarding the public review period. This information has already been stated, but I'm going to review just a couple of important points here. The first one being that review by the public and comment is essential for our Army Civil Works decision process. And so as it's stated here, the comment period ends on August 6th. And I'll also say that all comments will be considered and appropriately responded to in the final environmental impact statement. So Tom, if you could just move to the next slide, please. All right, as has already been stated, and you all know better than any of us, is this project is about flood protection. You know, Colonel Gibson spoke about disruptive flooding in your community, and Ms. Colosimo did too. So we call that flood risk management. So because we're seeking to manage flooding as best we can, with an acknowledgement that maybe not every and all flood event can be fully protected against. But this is about for the people living in and around Jackson, Mississippi. And what I remind myself about is how devastating flooding impacts really are. You know, we tend to sort of reduce our analysis to maybe some of the economic damages or environmental damages, but it's really about the human misery index associated with devastating flooding and the impact that has on jobs and livelihoods and homes and communities. So this is about flood protection, flood risk reduction. As a reminder, Congress has already authorized a project here. And so that authorization, however, is subject to the Corps of Engineers completing certain analyses and subsequent approval of the plan by our Secretary, Mr. Connor, as has already been stated. I think it's important to point out here too that some funding has already been appropriated by Congress through the bipartisan infrastructure law to initiate this project. And so as a process matter, the Corps of Engineers through our Vicksburg District is evaluating project alternatives as directed by Mr. Connor, and that's in the draft environmental impact statement. Our schedule has us completing the draft environmental impact statement and the final decision by Mr. Connor in early December. So with that, Tom, I will turn it back to you. Over.
Thank you, sir. Next would be Mr. Keith Turner with Rankin Hines, as we shortly call them.
Thank you, Tom. So I'm going to first touch on the history of flooding in the Pearl River. As many of you are aware, and it's been mentioned that we've had recent floods in 2020 and 2022, but the flooding in the Pearl River in Jackson has gone back from the origination of Jackson. It's flooded continuously. And 1979, of course, is the flood of record when we saw the worst flood so far, where we had thousands of homes flooded and Interstate 55 closed and our downtown business district completely flooded. Next slide, please. As a result of that flooding, the Corps worked with the community back in the 60s to develop what exists currently today, which is the East and West levee system. In addition, the Corps reconfigured and straightened out the Pearl River to try to improve the flow through the area. Unfortunately, in 1979, as I mentioned, the levees did not help everyone. We still had the levees were overtopped on the Jackson side, and Northeast Jackson, which was outside the levees, was flooded, as well as South Jackson. Out of that came an attempt to find a solution. So this is, going on 40 years. Levees were proposed at one point, which was not accepted due to downstream concerns. Chaco Dam, a dry dam north of Ross Barnett Reservoir, was proposed, and that was local objections killed that concept. So Rankin Hines Pearl River Flood and Drainage Control District got involved about 20 years ago, trying to find a solution that everyone could support. Out of that, from 2007, we've had some early work that, again, didn't get us where we needed to go. And then in 2012, we began the current effort under Section 211 to conduct a feasibility report. So it's been a long process to get where we are today. We did some public commenting process, and many of you have participated in that, in the scoping that we conducted, as well as the public meetings on our draft EIS documents. And then, of course, more recently, we began a collaboration when we turned our documents into the Corps, working with additional alternatives, and assisted in development of the current draft EIS. Next slide, please. One of the things that was heard more recently in the past year or so was the concerns, of course, of the tributaries that also flood on a regular basis, unrelated to the Pearl River backwater flooding. And one of the things we want to make sure folks realize that there are millions of dollars of projects both being designed, studied, and begun construction on the tributaries. This current map shows each of the different areas that various projects, as you can see, there's tens of projects that are proposed in both Hinds County, Rankin County, Madison County, as well as the city of Jackson. And those will not address every tributary issue, but they're a great significant progress, and much more is planned over the coming years by these communities individually to deal with tributary flooding. Next slide, please, which I think is last. So the goal of this, the purpose of this, of course, is to address Jackson metropolitan area flooding. We have obviously the city of Jackson, the city of Pearl, city of Flowood, Richland, and then the counties all struggle each year. We have 6 to 10 floods a year that fortunately the levees protect most of the time, but we remain vulnerable. With that, of course, is our critical infrastructure. As we saw years ago when we had the water system stressed out from flooding, we've had the wastewater treatment plant in Savannah Street overtopped and flooded, where we had raw sewage flowing in 1979 down south for almost a year. As I mentioned, I-55 went underwater in 79, as well as Lakeland Drive. And each year we have numerous roads that close due to the routine flooding that occurs, as well as our businesses struggle with having to vacate and so forth. And additionally, we have a lot of our communities that are first vulnerable communities are environmental justice communities in North Jackson, South Jackson. They're the first ones that flood, and they've had no solution, and they struggle with it each year. In some cases, it's just their roads going under and they can't get to their homes, but they have to pack up and move each time. Other cases, their homes go underwater. So we have to be sensitive to try and address those communities' needs as well. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. The next slide is the project area. So the area that you see there is comprised of Rankin, Hinds, and Madison counties, between River Mile 270, which is just south of Byram, all the way up to the Ross Barnett Reservoir Dam. And so that's what you're seeing there, and that the blue there represents the 100-year flood event. And as we've had a lot of feedback from the public, and as was brought about by Section 1176 of Word of, forgive me, 18, maybe 17, anyway, 18. But anyway, so we were asked to consider the downstream impact, and that is what we have done to date, and that will be talked about shortly. Downstream impacts to the south central part of Mississippi and a small portion of southeastern Louisiana. So what has USACE done to date? Well, based on the authorization there, in Section 3104 of WRDA 1986, the Secretary may construct the NED plan, the locally preferred plan, or some combination thereof. And as Mr. Turner mentioned, we have been in collaboration with the Rankin Hinds folks to prepare a DEIS to inform the Secretary's decision. And he challenged us to do a couple of things, one of which is to identify the National Economic Development Plan, to compare the level of flood protection for all of the alternatives, and then to assess the environmental acceptability and, of course, the technical feasibility as well of those alternates. So that being said, we've had several alternates to consider, including some that were screened out. And the last part there that is of particular interest to us is there's what is called the combination thereof. And so the DEIS will examine the reasonably foreseeable environmental impacts of all the reasonable alternatives that may be proposed. And so we mentioned multiple alternatives. So alternate A was the original non-structural plan, which was removed from further consideration. Alternate B was the levees plan that Mr. Turner mentioned, that was also removed from further consideration. And then alternate C was the locally preferred plan, sometimes known as One Lake, but included channel improvement, installation of a new weir and a levee plan, and that was carried forward for further analysis, and that was what Mr. Turner referred to in the 2022 submittal to the Assistant Secretary of the Army. And so we have since developed the alternatives that are listed there. Alternate A1, which is a modified non-structural plan, if you will. Alternate D, which is is likely the NED plan, which is a combination thereof with the weir, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. And then the last one there is alternate E, which is the CTO without weir. So talking about the alternates themselves, the alternatives just a little bit, non-structural is arrived at in that we identify the structures that are actually within the 25-year floodplain, and then those that are in there that are residential would then be raised to the 100-year flood event. And then for those that are non-residential, floodproofing would be considered. And then lastly, there would be voluntary property acquisition. And one of the key things there, of course, it is voluntary, but that those acquired properties would then basically become green space. Of the structures that are in that non-structural plan, 143 total were identified, of which 81 of those are residential, with the balance being non-residential. Alternate C, we mentioned earlier, the locally preferred plan, utilizes several features that were found to be quite attractive. We are clearing and lowering of the channel overbanks to increase the ability to hydraulically convey, or the water to move, if you will, through the channel. Originally, that plan also included demolition of the existing weir that's near the fuel water treatment plant. There will be construction of a new weir. Some of that AI, excuse me. Construction of a new weir with a low flow gate structure further downstream to an elevation of 258. It would also include the upgrading of an existing non-federal levee into a federalized levee over the Savannah Street water plant, and then there would be some upgrades in interior drainage. Sorry, my computer locked up.
Okay, just look at the PowerPoint again.
There you go.
Oh, it advanced, okay. All right. So the next alternatives to be considered, we mentioned the CTO, which is the combination thereof, alternate D and alternate E. The only difference between the two is basically that alternate D includes the new weir, alternate E is without the weir. One of the things that we did in collaboration with Rankin Hines is we made a determination that there were some ways in which we could improve the location of the conveyance. And one of the ways that we determined that we could actually move, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but that is the location of the new weir. And basically we moved that weir upstream, and we determined that there were multiple benefits from doing so. And so it contains the improved channelization. It contains the levee around EJ community. It includes, we did reduce the amount of excavation that was actually going to be required under the CTO alternate as well. There were some federal levee improvements. It still retains the existing weir that's there at the fuel water treatment plant. And the new weir is going to actually be constructed at a different elevation. Instead of 258, it's actually constructed at elevation 256 for the support of water supply and fish passage. I mentioned some non-federal levee improvements, and that would be for Savannah Street water plant. And then countermeasures for the bridges in the area that cross over the Pearl in the area of the study. And lastly, mitigation features that go along with that. I mentioned that there is alternate D with the weir, the CTO. I mentioned Canton Club levee. What you're seeing in the blow up, if you will, here is that's the construction, what that new levee would actually look like to protect that area. And for reference purposes, where that weir actually sits would be just downstream of I-20, and so it has several of the features of the non-structural plan, the A1. It does have the new weir, Canton Club levee around Savannah Street, and then I think that's it for that slide. Essentially, alternate E is the same, except you'll notice there is no weir shown downstream. And what you're actually seeing in both of these views here, the map for both D and E is what you're seeing is this is the 100-year flood event and inundations associated with that. Okay, and so here I would like to point out a couple of things. Well, you see, and there's a lot of red. What the red represents on this map, and you see that there is a blow up over to the left-hand side, but what the red actually represents is the without project condition. This is the 100-year event. And so the amount of inundation is familiar to everybody that's lived through the flooding. And so the unique thing that's shown over here to the left is you can see the blue areas, and this is just one example for the alternate V, if you will. One example, but the blue represents additional water that has been that would be placed on those areas. So that's with the CTO in place, and we do recognize there would be small impacts there. The other thing that's important to recognize here is that we were asked to look at downstream impacts, and what I just showed you there in that blow up, if you will, would be considered local impacts. Downstream or regional impacts were considered as well, and what we've determined is the modeling is that those impacts are basically considered negligible from 5 miles north of Monticello and further downstream. And I'll give you a little bit more information on that on the next slide. And so this is what I was speaking of with respect to downstream impacts. And so if you're looking at the graph here, this is in river miles along the bottom, and on the upper left here is actually the feet of elevation. And so what you're seeing here is the without project is this blue line that takes and runs along there. You're seeing some local stations, if you will, that will help people relate to that. And the weir is actually sitting about right there. And so you see the 100-year event with the project in place, there is about a 5-foot elevation change between the without project condition and the with project condition. And then once we get south of about where the Gallatin Street landfill is, once you get south of that, then there are some minor impacts. And those impacts have been estimated at 3 to 5 inches for a 100-year flood event, as compared to not doing anything or without project. We mentioned that the hydraulics indicate that the impacts are negligible once you get down approaching Monticello. We want to recognize one other thing that has to happen is that sedimentation modeling will need to be accomplished at a later date. And so that is on tap for a later action before anything would actually happen. Okay. All right. And next on the agenda would be Jason Emery, and Jason will talk about the environmental side of things. Jason.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Now that we've got the primer for all the alternatives, I'm going to turn towards the National Environmental Policy Act efforts. And as you all may know, that the National Environmental Policy Act, we've published this draft EIS. And the intent of that is to share the understanding of the agency's impacts and attempts at mitigations or resource work. So I'll cover over the next 8 slides the top level findings summarized from the EIS. Please take a look at the document for more details if you're looking for them. Specifically turning to this slide, first category, habitat mitigation. You'll see that the alternatives are across the top of the table on the upper part of the slide. and the categories of impact are down the side. To interpret this table, you'll need to know a few key terms. AHUs are average annual habitat units, which represent the functions and values of the particular habitat. Mitigation is based on lost functions, this is key, and not a one-to-one ratio of acres. Terrestrial impacts, looking further, the terrestrial impacts are inclusive of the BLH swamp and forested uplands, were determined by running the Certified Habitat Evaluation Process Models, or HEP models. This was done in 2014 by the non-federal interest and is presented in their 2020/2022 EIS. The acres of riverine impacts were not determined, the acres of riverine impacts were determined by the footprint of each project. We haven't yet run the HEP models on them. Turning to the bullet points, the lacustrine habitat impacts, lakes and ponds, would be self-mitigated by alternatives C and D because a larger lake created by the alternatives would adequately replace the lost values and functions of the Pearl in this location. With alternative E, the lacustrine habitat would likely need to be mitigated. To come to a firm conclusion, more analysis is needed. Looking at the terrestrial components, the BLH, swamp, and forested impacts, the non-federal interest identified some lands in the 2020-2022 EIS that could be used for mitigation. Those lands are located within the Pearl River Basin and above the Ross Barnett Reservoir. Mitigation team, it's a team of individuals, is currently running habitat models to determine how much terrestrial mitigation can be produced at those sites. And then turning to the riverine impacts last on that table, the riverine impacts calculated in the 2014 habitat evaluation process models were not based on obligate riverine species. Those species are those that are dependent. Obligate species are dependent on riverine systems for at least one part of their life history and are anticipated to decline in response to in-stream habitat alterations due to their dependence on the natural flow regime. Models using obligate riverine species need to be run before impacts can be accurately determined. Therefore, at this time, we are reporting out acres of riverine impacts. A detailed mitigation plan will be presented in the subsequent NEPA document or documents and will include mitigation for all habitat types. Next slide, please. Again, the alternatives are across the top of the table here, and the species are down the rows. There are 8 species identified within the study area. The cells contain USACE's effect determinations per alternative and species. The team worked closely with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service when making these effect determinations. As you can see, alternative C and CTO with WEIR, alternative D, have the same impacts on listed species. That is because it is assumed, like alternative C, construction of the CTO with WEIR would likely eliminate riverine habitat. Velocity analysis, like that conducted for alternative C, is being conducted to better understand the potential impact of the CTO on the riverine system. Tom mentioned that earlier as well. Alternative without WEIR, or alternative E, has slightly different impacts due to the fact that the river is expected to function as a riverine system except during high water events, which is not anticipated to be much different from existing conditions. The turtle species in the table are still potentially impacted as they use the bank of the river, which would be excavated under this alternative. Bankline changes may or may not provide suitable habitat. This will be determined through further study. And finally, determinations and strategy was developed in coordination. These determinations and strategy, were developed in coordination with the team, including Rankin Hines, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Mississippi Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, and our engineering department. Additionally, this is shared in our biological assessment. Next slide. Turning to cultural resources, all of the impacts, you can see here, all of the impacts have the potential to affect cultural resources, including National Register listed eligible buildings, districts, sites, or structures. Accordingly, the agency has begun under regulations 36 CFR 800.14, the development of a programmatic agreement to give us a framework of how to address these things. The programmatic agreement will govern all the parts of the undertaking, i.e. the project that is selected ultimately for construction. The PA is developed in conjunction with the State Historic Preservation Office from Mississippi, federally recognized tribal governments, and other stakeholders who have an interest in historic preservation components. That process has been kicked off earlier and is ongoing. The PA will be executed before the record of decision is signed, and ideally, of course, before the final EIS is complete. Next meeting for that is scheduled on July 10th. And we'll be having regular consultation meetings throughout this process before we finalize the NEPA document. Next slide. Tribal resources. Looking at the tribal resources, there are ongoing evaluation of impacts as part of USACE's tribal consultation. It's the policy of the federal government to engage with federally recognized tribes, and we are required to think about and to address if our actions will significantly adversely affect one of three categories: tribal rights, tribal lands, or protected tribal resources. In meeting with the federally recognized tribal governments to date, we have not identified any tribal lands or tribal rights that would be impacted at all, let alone adversely. We're continuing to consult with tribes. We have identified that there are protected tribal resources within the study area. It does not mean they will be directly impacted. The types of resources we're referring to are cultural keystone species and a wide variety of places and landscapes, including archaeological sites, cemeteries, trails, and pathways. We're going to continue to consult with our federal tribal partners to include measures to address these resources as we develop the project scope, bringing in keystone species where appropriate, and avoiding or mitigating resources identified there as archaeological sites, burial sites, etc. And we're going to do that on a government-to-government basis, that is United States government with tribes, or we're going to do that under the Section 106 process, that PA process that I outlined earlier, depending upon how the tribes want to approach it. We'll be open either way. Next slide. Environmental justice communities. We've discussed these communities a great deal in the study process. These are our top end findings for that. So the no action alternative, right? If we do nothing, which is the standard of, against which we compare things to, all structures in the 100-year floodplain, 773 of them are in areas of EJ concern and would be affected by the 100-year flood. The vast majority, thinking about alternative A, a vast majority of the 143 structures are within areas of EJ concern. Alternative C, right, the LPP provides flood risk reduction benefits to those in areas of EJ concern, but less than the two CTO plans. Over 2/3 of the structures flooding under no action would no longer flood under alternative CTO, with or without weir. There are, there are consequences when we take actions and we modify river systems. One of those is potential inducements. Our analysis indicates that there are structure flooding inducements that occur either through alternative C or through the CTO, 83 structures under alternative C and 52 within areas of EJ concern, given our current level of analysis. Next slide. Had to take a drink. Recreational benefits. We've evaluated recreational benefits. Again, the benefits and impacts are across the top. Alternatives to the left on the side. Looking at the no action, there's no change. Looking at alternative A1, there's no change. Really getting down to the C and CTOs. Yes, there are incidental recreation benefits provided by alternative C. There are also incidental recreation benefits provided by the CTO in either format. And that's benefits based on water recreation and benefits based on shoreline recreation. There are also potential impacts to LaFleur's Landing State Park. Why does that matter? A number of grants have been given to LaFleur's Landing from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And a condition of that grant for that development is that no property acquired or developed with assistance under this section shall, without the approval of secretary, be converted to other than public outdoor recreational uses. So in keeping with the recreational benefits and assuming that we don't impact it, there are opportunities to maintain the benefits provided by that grant as well through this project with the CTO or alternative C. Next slide. So I'm going to give you some of the, like we did on the first slide, I'm going to give you some details so you can interpret the bullets here. We start with the low and high cost estimates that you'll see for alternative D and E. They were developed to account for the uncertainty in the engineering costs of these alternatives. Net benefits, which is a key term here, it represents the monetized NED benefits less the cost of construction and implementation of an alternative. And then, of course, the benefit to cost ratio is the ratio of monetized national economic development benefits to the cost of construction and the implementation of an alternative. A ratio greater than 1 indicates that the benefits accrued by an alternative are greater than its costs. So when we look at this, we'll see that alternative D, it ranges between 487 million costs and 655 million. It yields net benefits of 8.2 to 1.6 million with a BC ratio of 1.4, well, with a range between 1.4 and 1.1. Alternative E, CTO with weir, costs range between 400 and 508 million, with the net benefits between 608 and 2.4 million, with the ratio range between 1.4 and 1.1. Very similar alternatives, excuse me. Alternative A would cost 50 million estimated, with net benefits of $2.1 million and a benefit cost ratio of 2.2. And then alternate A1 with the Canton Club levee would have a $60 million first cost price tag. It would yield $2.6 million of benefits with a cost ratio, BC ratio of 2.1. Next slide. This will be my last one. As you know, that there are a number of facilities that were in existence along the river. We have reviewed the documents provided by the non-federal interest. They conducted an analyses in accordance with the American Society for Testing Materials, phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessment standards in 2014, 2021, and 2023. The reports have been reviewed by USACE according to the engineering regulation. This is our engineering regulation for HTRW, as we call it, 1165-2-132, and that guidance has been used to inform our next steps. Once an alternative is selected, additional assessment will be conducted per these engineering guidelines and the ASTM, and it will be incorporated into the planning process. Tom, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Emery. So I would like to next report on the timeline. So you've heard some summary, some high-level discussions of the contents and findings, if you will, from the draft environmental impact statement. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the public review ends on 6 August. The period of August through September, the team will be working to address the public comment. We anticipate a notice of availability with respect to the final EIS to come out in the month of October, and with a final EIS currently scheduled for delivery in December of this year, in which we are optimistic we could get a determination by Mr. Connor and a record of decision. as you heard at the very beginning, it's valid, it's very important. It's imperative that we get your feedback. We mentioned that we'll be accepting that through the 6th of August. There are multiple ways that you can do that. At the very top of the list, there is an email address in which you can submit your comments there. You can send a comment in via regular mail, and there's the address there from Mr. Eric Williams with the New Orleans District. And then on the project website, there is, you'll see at the bottom of the page, and we've even got a QR code over there on the lower right-hand corner, so it'll take you straight to the project website. When we conduct our face-to-face meetings on 10 July, of course, all of these resources will still be available. We'll also have, if you will, hard copy comment cards that people can submit their comments and basically put those in a box, and we will respond to those as well. At this time, that concludes our presentation. I will entertain any comments from Ms. Calfimo or Mr. Bush or Mr. Constance before we shut down the. That concludes this evening's presentation. Are we still receiving chats? Yep, okay. Yep. Christy, are we still receiving chats?
Hey, Tom,
Yes.
this is Troy. So we have captured all of the comments in here, and the team will address those comments, and then we'll post them for public consumption here. If there are, we should give a few more moments so that they can enter as many comments as they can. It's not that we don't want to answer you right away. It's just some of that information we would like to be able to dredge out from the larger body of information, provide a good response, and then post it back out for you. So we should allow some time for people to continue to put comments in the chat so that we can respond to them the best that we can. Over.
Yes, thank you, Troy. Just before 7 o'clock Central Time here, I propose that we stay online at least until 7:15, if not 7:30. So we're going to hang on here for a couple minutes.
Mr. Shaw, this is the court reporter. Would you like for me to stay on the record or just go off the record and stay with you guys, or are you done, you think, making your record?
Yes, ma'am. Let's stay on the record for a little longer, please.
Okay, so you want me to continue to put everything down on the record?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Tom, it appears the comments are starting to slow down here. Got one more just popped up. Just wanted to remind everybody that this is a comment period. We have an email address up there so you can keep them coming. We want to take these comments that are showing up in the chat. We're capturing the chat. We're also moving those over into a Word document to make sure we don't lose them. The team will start working on responses to those right away and post them. All of your other comments, we want you to keep coming. It's extremely important for us to have a good understanding of what the public's views are, what their concerns, so that we can develop an EIS that is responsive to the interest and concerns of the public. So we want to thank you very much for participating tonight. And we look forward to you attending in the subsequent meetings. And those meetings will be a bit more interactive, but it's a little bit easier to manage. So thank you for that. Tom, we can let this roll. I'm more than happy to stay for a lot longer to keep capturing these. But I turn it over to the district to determine whether or not you want to hold everyone in the room. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. We will stay in place until 7:15, and if we don't have any chats after that point, we will go ahead and shut down the WebEx. We once again want to thank you all for joining us. We can't do this without you. We can't do this without your input. It's extremely valuable, and you'll be hearing more about this at the public meeting. So we're going to go back on mute until 7:15. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Tom Shaw. We're going to call this the 2-minute warning. If you still desire to have your chat centered, please do so now. We will adjourn shortly.
Hey, Tom, it's Robin. If I may, can I make a remark?
Yes, ma'am, of course.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for their time and effort in making the presentation of materials, and certainly all the participants here and taking the time out of your evening and your dedication to the subject and the flooding in Jackson and the larger area. Also appreciate all the comments that are coming in on the chat, and know this is an important subject, and the dedication of time is and experience and knowledge is what's really important here. So look forward to continuing engagements. Virtual engagements are a little different than the ones in person, and so also looking forward to those in the next few weeks. So thanks to all, including the team.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. And so,
Melissa Sam is asking about Ted.
all right, everybody, it's 7:15. I would just remind everybody that if you are unable to get your comments in via chat, there is, we'll go back to the presentation to the very last page where we have both the email addresses and the normal mail, by which two ways that you can submit your comments. And just as a reminder, there's a QR code and the project website for you to stay abreast at with respect to the current ongoings. And as we mentioned, we will be uploading the questions and answers as we get those developed. We'll get those out on the project website. And I just thank you for your participation. We would then please invite you to attend either on the 10th of July in Slidell, Monticello, or Jackson. Oh, I'm sorry, I got them backwards. It's the 10th, and both meetings are in Jackson. Thank you. At the Mississippi Public Broadcasting, their auditorium at 2 o'clock, and then 6 p.m. at the Mississippi Trademark. The next day, we will have a meeting at 11 in Slidell at the, I believe it's the Civic Center or Convention Center. And then at 6 p.m. In Monticello, Mississippi, there, and I believe that's their Civic Center as well. So,
one question, will they be given access to the recording? Remind them maybe that'll be online.
yes, the recordings will be posted just like the transcripts and questions will, so you will have that information. With that, we are adjourning. We're going out in 3, 2, 1. Thank you all. Good night.